She thought the bruises on her throat would fade before anyone noticed. She was wrong. At 11:47 p.m. in a Manhattan penthouse that cost more per month than most people earned in a year, Elowyn Mercer stood in front of a mirror and finally stopped pretending. The fingerprints were still visible. Dark. Deliberate. A reminder that some men don't need to raise their voices to break you. But when Damian Crowe walked into his own kitchen and saw what she'd been hiding, everything changed. Because the most dangerous man in New York had just found his next target. If you're watching from somewhere in the world right now, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels, and if it grabs you, hit that like button. Let's go. The first thing people needed to understand about working in Damian Crowe's penthouse was this. You didn't exist, not in any way that mattered. You were furniture with a pulse, a shadow that restocked his whiskey, ironed his shirts, and disappeared before he remembered you had a face. The job paid well enough that you didn't ask questions, well enough that you learned to move through rooms like smoke. Elowyn Mercer had been doing exactly that for 8 months. She was 26, though most days she felt older. Thin in a way that didn't photograph well, all sharp elbows and cautious movements. Her hair was brown and forgettable, pulled back tight enough to give her headaches. She wore the same thing every day, black pants, white blouse, ballet flats that didn't make noise on marble. The uniform wasn't required. She just preferred to blend in. It was safer that way. The penthouse itself was ridiculous. 32nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Central Park. Furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. Everything was steel and glass and cold perfection. The kind of place that didn't tolerate fingerprints or mistakes. Damian Crowe was rarely there. When he was, he moved through the space like he was barely tethered to it. Suit jacket off, tie loosened, phone always in his hand. He was maybe 35, though Elowyn had never asked. Tall, dark-haired, the kind of good-looking that felt dangerous if you stared too long. He owned half the real estate in Lower Manhattan, or so the rumors went. Construction, development. Other things people didn't talk about in polite company. Elowyn had spoken to him exactly 4 times in 8 months. The first time, he'd asked her name. The second, whether she'd seen his briefcase. The third and fourth were instructions about dry cleaning. He didn't look at her when he spoke. Didn't look at anyone, really. His attention was always somewhere else. On a screen, a deal, a problem that needed solving. She preferred it that way. Because the last thing Elowyn needed was to be seen. It was a Tuesday in late September when everything started to crack. She'd been in the kitchen, scrubbing a countertop that was already spotless, when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't need to look at it. She knew the pattern. 3 buzzes, stop, 2 more. Then silence. Then it would start again. Victor. Her hands stilled on the counter. She didn't pull the phone out. Didn't check the messages. She'd stopped reading them 2 weeks ago, after the one that said, "You can't hide forever. I know where you are." He didn't, though. She'd been careful. New apartment, new job, new number that she'd only given to her sister and the staffing agency. She'd deleted her social media, changed her routines, stopped going to the places they used to go. She'd done everything right, except he kept finding ways in. The phone buzzed again, her chest tightened. It was fine, she was fine. He couldn't get to her here. The building had security, cameras, a doorman who took his job seriously. Victor Halston might have money and connections and a smile that made people trust him, but he didn't have access to this world. She repeated that to herself until her heartbeat slowed. Then she went back to scrubbing. By 11 p.m., she'd finished her checklist. Floors mopped, dishwasher emptied, mail sorted, plants watered. Damian wasn't home yet, which wasn't unusual. Sometimes he didn't come back until 2 or 3 in the morning. Sometimes not at all. She should have left. Her shift technically ended at 10, but she'd been staying later recently, telling herself it was because she wanted to be thorough, that she took pride in her work. The truth was simpler and sadder. She didn't want to go home. Home was a studio apartment in Washington Heights with thin walls and a lock that felt too flimsy. Home was where she lay awake at night, listening for footsteps in the hallway that might be his. Home was where the phone buzzed and she couldn't make it stop. So she stayed. She was wiping down the kitchen sink when she felt it, the pull, the ache that started in her chest and spread outward until her hands were shaking. She gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white, and tried to breathe through it. Not now. But her body didn't listen. It never did. The panic came in waves. First the tightness in her throat, then the dizziness, then the horrible certainty that she was dying or losing her mind or both. She pressed her forehead against the cool marble and counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her phone buzzed again, and something inside her snapped. She pulled it out with shaking hands and finally looked. 17 messages. You look tired lately. Are you eating enough? I saw you last week. You didn't see me. I miss you. We need to talk. You're being childish. I'm worried about you. Everyone's asking about you. You're embarrassing yourself. This isn't you. Come home. Please. I'm outside your building. The last one had been sent 40 minutes ago, her apartment building. Her breath came out in a sound that wasn't quite a sob. She scrolled up, looking for the earlier messages, the ones from yesterday, the day before. Photos. Screenshots of her walking to the subway, her schedule somehow, her route. He'd been following her. For how long? Her knees buckled. She slid down to the kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, phone still clutched in her hand. The marble was cold against her legs. The lights were too bright. Everything was too much. She didn't hear the front door open, didn't hear the footsteps crossing the living room. She only realized she wasn't alone when a voice cut through the static in her head. Who did this to you? Her head snapped up. Damien Crowe stood in the doorway of the kitchen, still in his suit, tie undone, looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. No, not at her. At her throat. She raised a hand instinctively, fingers brushing the bruises she'd covered with makeup that morning. The makeup she'd apparently sweated off during her shift. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry, I was just leaving. That's not what I asked. He didn't move, didn't come closer, just stood there, hands in his pockets, waiting. Elowen tried to stand. Her legs didn't cooperate. She pressed harder against the cabinet, trying to make herself smaller, trying to disappear the way she'd been taught. It's nothing, she managed. I'm fine. You're on my kitchen floor at midnight with bruises on your neck. His voice was flat, factual. That's not fine. She didn't know what to say to that. Damien tilted his head slightly, studying her. Then he did something unexpected. He sat down. Not next to her, not close enough to crowd her, but on the floor, back against the opposite cabinet, legs stretched out in front of him, his expensive suit wrinkling against the tile. I'm not going to ask again, he said quietly, but I'm not leaving until you answer. The thing about Elowen was this. She'd gotten very good at lying. She'd had to be. When your fiancé isolates you from your friends and you need to explain why you stopped showing up to dinners. When your family asks why you quit grad school and you can't tell them it's because he needed you home. When your coworkers notice you flinch at sudden movements and you blame it on being clumsy. She had a whole arsenal of excuses. They usually worked, but sitting on that floor with Damien Crowe watching her like he could see through every wall she'd built, the lies wouldn't come. My ex, she said finally. The words felt like glass. His name is Victor. Damien said nothing, just waited. We were engaged. For 2 years. I left 6 months ago. She swallowed. He didn't take it well. He's still bothering you. It wasn't a question. She nodded. These? Damien gestured toward her neck. 3 weeks ago. I went back to get some of my things from storage. He was waiting. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. He didn't hit me. He wanted me to know he could. The silence that followed was heavy. Then Damien said, What does he do? For work? He's in finance, hedge fund manager, Halston and Price. Something flickered across Damien's face. Victor Halston. You know him? I know of him. His tone shifted slightly, colder. Keep talking. So she did. It came out in pieces. Fragmented, not chronological, but once she started, she couldn't seem to stop. She told him about how they'd met at a charity gala 3 years ago, how Victor had been charming, attentive, interested in her research on urban poverty, how he'd made her feel seen in a way no one else had, how he'd proposed after 8 months, how slowly, carefully, he'd started suggesting changes, small ones at first. That dress is beautiful, but maybe something more classic? Your friends are great, but they don't really get our lifestyle. Grad school is stressful. Maybe take a semester off. How those suggestions became expectations, then demands, then consequences. He never hit me, she said again, like it mattered. Not with his fists, but he knew exactly how to make me feel like I was losing my mind. He'd tell me something, then later swear he never said it. He'd move my things and act concerned when I couldn't find them. He'd plan dates and then cancel last minute, saying I'd gotten the day wrong. Gaslighting, Damien said. Yeah. She laughed, but it sounded wrong. I didn't realize that's what it was, not until I was too deep in to get out easily. What changed? I found his journals. She wrapped her arms around her knees. He kept detailed notes. Every lie he'd told me, every manipulation, every time he'd made me doubt myself. He'd written it all down like it was a game, like I was a project. Her throat tightened. That's when I knew I wasn't crazy. That's when I left. Damien was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. How did you get away? My sister helped. She drove up from Philadelphia, waited outside while I grabbed what I could fit in 2 bags and took me back with her. I stayed there for a month. Then I came back to the city and found this job. She looked down at her hands. I thought I'd covered my tracks. New phone, new address, new everything. But he keeps finding me anyway. Tonight? She showed him the phone, the messages, the photos. Damien read them without expression. When he was done, he handed the phone back and stood. Stay here. What? No, You're not going back to Washington Heights tonight. Not with him outside your building. He pulled out his own phone. There's a guest room down the hall. You'll stay there. Mister. Crow, I can't. Damien. He looked at her. Really looked. For the first time since she'd started working for him. And yes, you can. He made 3 calls. The first was to building security, telling them to pull footage from the lobby and surrounding streets for the past month. The second was to someone named Marcus, speaking in a low voice about running a background check and seeing what we can find. The third was to someone whose name he didn't use. I need a favor, Damien said into the phone. There's a problem that needs handling, quietly. A pause. Victor Halston. Yeah, that one. I'll send details. Another pause. No, not yet. Just information for now. He hung up and turned back to Elowen, who was still on the floor. You're safe here, he said. For tonight, that's all you need to worry about. Why are you helping me? The question seemed to surprise him. He considered it, then crouched down so they were eye level. Because you work for me, and someone put their hands on you. His voice was quiet, but absolute. That makes it my business. It was such a strange answer, territorial, possessive, even, but not in the way Victor had been possessive. This was different. This was protection. Elowen didn't argue. She didn't have the energy. She let Damien help her up, let him show her to a guest room that was bigger than her entire apartment, let him bring her a glass of water and a new toothbrush still in its package. Lock the door, he said before leaving. Get some sleep. She did lock it, but she didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, a king-size thing with sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and tried to process what had just happened. She'd told someone. After 6 months of hiding, of lying, of pretending everything was fine, she'd finally told someone the truth, and he'd believed her. She waited for the regret to come, the shame, the voice in her head that sounded like Victor, telling her she'd made a mistake, that she was being dramatic, that no one would understand. But it didn't come. Instead, for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something else. Relief. Across the penthouse, in his office, Damien sat at his desk with Victor Halston's file pulled up on 3 different screens. He'd known of him, peripherally. They didn't run in the same circles. Damien's money came from real estate and construction, while Halston played with other people's investments. But Manhattan's elite was a small world. You heard things. What he was seeing now made his jaw tight. Halston was good at hiding. His record was clean, his reputation polished. But Marcus had access to things that didn't show up in public records. Bank statements showing large cash withdrawals with no paper trail. A sealed complaint from an ex-girlfriend 5 years ago. 2 prior restraining orders that had been quietly dropped. The man was a predator in a nice suit. Damien opened another window and started making a list. He wasn't a good man. He'd never pretended to be. His business involved things that couldn't be done with permits and board approvals. He knew people who specialized in solving problems that couldn't be solved legally. He'd built his empire by being willing to do what others weren't. But there were lines, and men who hurt women for sport were on the wrong side of every single one. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus found 3 more complaints, all withdrawn, all settled with NDAs. This guy's a repeat offender. Damien texted back, how much to make him disappear, professionally or permanently? Start with professionally. Give me 48 hours. He put the phone down and leaned back in his chair, staring at the photo Marcus had included. Victor Halston at some gala, arm around a woman who wasn't Elowen, smiling like he didn't have a care in the world. That smile was going to cost him everything. The next morning, Elowen woke to sunlight she wasn't expecting. Her apartment faced an air shaft. She hadn't seen morning sun in months. But this room, this ridiculous, beautiful room, had windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, and the light poured in like something out of a painting. She lay there for a moment, disoriented, before memory caught up. The kitchen, the phone, Damien. She sat up quickly, then winced. Her body ached in that specific way that came after a panic attack. Tight shoulders, sore throat, exhaustion that felt like gravity. There was a knock on the door. Yeah? Her voice was rough. I'm leaving coffee outside, Damien called through the door. Take your time. She heard footsteps retreating. When she finally opened the door, there was indeed coffee and toast, and what looked like scrambled eggs that were still warm. She carried the tray back inside and ate sitting cross-legged on the bed, trying not to think about what happened next. She couldn't stay here. She knew that. This was temporary. Emergency shelter, nothing more. She'd thank him, go back to her apartment, figure out her next move. Except Victor knew where she lived, and he was still out there. When she finally emerged from the guest room, showered and wearing yesterday's clothes, she found Damien in the kitchen. He was on his phone, pacing, speaking in clipped sentences about permits and zoning variances. He glanced up when she entered, held up one finger, 1 minute, and finished the call. How'd you sleep? I didn't really, but thank you for everything. He nodded. Marcus is running down some information on Halston. Should have it by tonight. Marcus? Someone who works for me. You don't need to worry about the details. That should have bothered her. A few months ago it would have, but right now, with her nerves still raw and her defenses worn thin, she just felt grateful. I should go, she said anyway. No. Excuse me? You're not going back to that apartment. Damien leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Not until we know what we're dealing with. Mr. Crow? Damien. Damien, I appreciate the help, really, but I can't just move in here. You're not moving in. You're staying until it's safe to leave. There's a difference. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she didn't need saving, that she could handle this herself. But the words stuck in her throat because they weren't true. She couldn't handle this alone. She'd been trying for 6 months, and Victor was still closing in. What about my job? She asked instead. I'm supposed to be here 3 days a week. That's it. So keep coming 3 days a week. On the other days, don't go home. Go somewhere public. Somewhere with cameras. He paused. Or stay here. Your choice. Why would you do this? I told you last night. No, really. Why? She stepped closer. You don't know me. I'm your housekeeper. You don't owe me anything. Damien was quiet for a moment, studying her with that same unreadable expression. My mother, he said finally. When I was 12, she left my father. He was, well, let's just say he didn't take it well. His voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. She tried to hide. He found her 3 times. The 4th time, she got lucky. Someone helped her disappear for real. Elowen's chest tightened. I was with my father when she left. Didn't see her again until I was 18. He looked out the window. She survived because someone decided her life was worth protecting. I'm returning the favor. She didn't know what to say to that. So she just said, okay? His eyes snapped back to her. Okay? I'll stay. Until we figure this out. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. Good. The rest of the day felt surreal. Elowen went through her usual routine, cleaning, organizing, restocking, except now she was hyper-aware of Damien's presence. He worked from home, door to his office mostly closed, but every so often she'd catch him watching her. Not in a creepy way. More like he was making sure she was still there, still safe. Around 3 p.m., her phone rang. She almost didn't answer it, but it wasn't Victor's number. It was her sister, Claire. "Hey," Elowen said, stepping into the guest room for privacy. "Oh, thank God." Claire's voice was tight. "I've been calling your apartment all morning. Why aren't you home?" "I'm at work." "What's wrong?" "Someone came by my place last night, asked if I knew where you were." Elowen's stomach dropped. "Who?" "Didn't give a name, but he was polished, expensive suit, very concerned boyfriend energy, said he was worried about you." "Victor." "That's what I figured." Claire paused. "Elle, you need to call the police." "And tell them what? That my ex sent me text messages and asked my sister where I live? That he's stalking you. They won't do anything. You know they won't." She pressed her forehead against the window. "Not until he actually hurts me." "So what's your plan? Just wait for that to happen?" "No, She stopped. What was her plan? Hide in Damien's penthouse forever? "I'm working on it." "You're scaring me." "I'm okay, I promise. I'm somewhere safe right now." They talked for a few more minutes, with Claire extracting promises that Elowen would check in daily. When she hung up, she felt hollowed out. Victor wasn't backing down. He was escalating. That night, Marcus sent his report. Damien read it at the kitchen table while Elowen pretended not to watch from the couch. She'd made herself useful by organizing his bookshelf, but really she was just waiting. Finally, he looked up. "He's been tracking your phone." Her stomach turned over. "How?" "You have an iPhone?" "Yeah." "Did you share your location with him when you were together?" Maybe? He set up a lot of stuff on my phone, said it was for safety." Damien's expression went flat. "Check your settings. Family sharing. See if his Apple ID is still connected." She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and navigated to the settings. There it was. Victor's email. Still linked. Still with access to her location, her photos, her apps. "Oh my God." "Turn it off. Now." She did, fingers fumbling. Then she went through every other setting Marcus's report had highlighted. Find my iPhone, shared albums, third-party apps that had access to more than they should. By the time she was done, she felt sick. "He's been watching me this whole time," she whispered. "Not anymore." Damien handed her a new phone, still in the box. "Use this from now on. New number. Don't give it to anyone except people you trust completely." "I can't take—" "Yes, you can." His tone left no room for argument. "And tomorrow, we're closing your old bank accounts and opening new ones. If he had access to your phone, he probably had access to those too." She wanted to cry, or scream, or both. Instead, she said, "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Damien stood. "This is just the beginning." That night, Victor Halston received an interesting email. It came from a law firm he'd never heard of, with an attachment that made his blood run cold. Photographs, financial records, screenshots of conversations that should have been private, and a message. "Cease all contact with Elowen Mercer immediately. Do not call, do not text, do not visit her workplace or residence. Do not contact her family or friends. Any further action will result in the attached documentation being sent to the SEC, your employer, and every news outlet in Manhattan. You have 24 hours to comply. No signature, no name, just a phone number that went straight to voicemail when he called it." Victor stared at his computer screen for a long time. Then he threw his phone across the room. Someone was playing a game they didn't understand, and Victor Halston didn't lose games. Victor didn't sleep that night. He sat in his home office, a chrome and leather shrine to success, and read the email 17 times. Each pass made his hands shake worse than the last. Someone had been digging, deep. The photographs alone were damaging enough. Him outside Elowen's apartment building at 2 a.m. following her to the subway. Sitting in his car across from her sister's place in Philadelphia. But the financial records were worse. Transactions he'd buried under shell companies and falsified reports. Trades made with information he shouldn't have had. The kind of thing the SEC would take very seriously. He'd been careful. So careful. And someone had unraveled it all in less than 48 hours. The rage came first. Hot and familiar. Someone was threatening him. Actually threatening him. Victor Halston, who'd built a career on knowing exactly where every player stood on the board, who'd made millions by understanding leverage better than anyone else in the game. But underneath the rage was something colder, fear, because whoever sent that email had access to things that shouldn't exist anymore. Documents he'd personally shredded, conversations he'd had in rooms he'd swept for bugs. They hadn't just been watching him recently. They'd been building a case. He picked up his phone, the new one he'd bought after throwing the other against the wall, and dialed a number he hadn't used in 2 years. "It's been a while," the voice on the other end said. No greeting, no warmth. "I need information on someone. I'm retired. This is important." A pause. "Who?" "I don't know yet. That's the problem." Victor pulled up the email again. "Someone's threatening me. Professional job. They have access to sealed records. I need to know who I'm dealing with." "Send me what you have." Victor forwarded the email and waited. 3 minutes later, his phone rang again. "You pissed off someone serious," the voice said. "That law firm doesn't exist. The phone number's a burner that's already dead. But the data formatting matches work I've seen before. Private security firms, the expensive kind. Can you trace it? Not without more time and money than you probably want to spend. My advice? Walk away from whatever this is about." "That's not an option. Then you're on your own. Good luck." The line went dead. Victor sat in the dark and thought about Elowen. Sweet, damaged Elowen who'd looked at him like he hung the moon when they first met, who'd believed every lie he told, who'd been so easy to mold into exactly what he needed. She wasn't smart enough to orchestrate this. She barely had enough spine to leave him in the first place, which meant someone else was involved. Someone who thought they could scare him into backing down. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Morning came too fast. Elowen woke to the smell of coffee again, but this time she didn't wait for Damien to knock. She got dressed, grateful she'd grabbed a few things from her apartment yesterday while Marcus kept watch downstairs, and found him already at the kitchen counter, reading something on his tablet. "Morning," she said. He looked up. "You look better." "I actually slept." "Good." He pushed a mug toward her. "We need to talk about your apartment." Her stomach sank. "What about it?" "You're not going back there. Not to live." "Damien, I had Marcus check it out last night. Your locks are standard builder grade. Your windows don't have security bars. There's no doorman, no cameras in the hallways. If Halston wanted to get inside, he could do it in under 3 minutes. She wrapped her hands around the mug. "So what am I supposed to do? I can't afford to break my lease." "Already handled. Marcus paid the early termination fee. You're month to month now, so you can leave whenever." "You can't just—" "I can, and I did." His voice was matter-of-fact. "Your stuff is being moved into storage today. Climate-controlled, 24-hour security. You can decide what to do with it later." Elowen stared at him. "You're moving me out of my apartment without asking me first?" "Yes." "That's insane." "That's efficient." He took a sip of his own coffee. "Would you have agreed to it if I'd asked?" "That's not the point." "That's exactly the point." He set the mug down. "You're not thinking clearly. You're scared and exhausted and second-guessing everything. So I'm making the decisions that keep you safe until you can think clearly again." She wanted to be angry. Should have been angry. This was exactly the kind of controlling behavior that Victor had specialized in. Making choices for her, deciding what was best, taking away her agency piece by piece. But there was a difference. Victor had done it to trap her, to make her dependent, to ensure she couldn't function without him. Damien was doing it to set her free. She could see that difference. Even through the fog of panic and exhaustion, she could see it. "Fine," she said finally, "but I'm paying you back. We'll discuss it later." "No, now. I'm not a charity case." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "Stubborn. You have no idea. I'm starting to get one." He stood. I have a meeting downtown. Marcus will be here by noon to take you to the bank. New accounts, like we discussed. Don't argue with him. He's worse than I am. Is that possible? You'll find out. He grabbed his suit jacket from the back of a chair and headed for the door, then stopped. Elowen? Yeah? You're doing better than you think you are. The door closed before she could respond. Marcus turned out to be a brick wall in a leather jacket. He showed up at exactly noon, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that suggested he'd seen some things and wasn't interested in discussing them. He nodded at Elowen, gestured toward the door, and said, "Let's go." In the car, a black SUV with tinted windows that screamed private security, he handed her a folder. "Your new identity," he said. She opened it. Bank account numbers. A debit card already activated. A new email address. This is excessive. This is thorough. Marcus pulled into traffic without looking at her. Halston's a sophisticated operator. He's not going to stop because you changed your phone number. We need to make you disappear from every system he has access to. How do you know what he has access to? Because I used to do what he does. Just for different people. That should have worried her. Instead, it was almost comforting. At least someone on her side knew how the game worked. They spent 3 hours at 2 different banks, setting up accounts that weren't connected to anything in her old life. Marcus had brought all the documentation they needed, proof of address using Damien's penthouse, employment verification from his property management company, even a credit check that somehow came back better than her actual credit. "How did you do that?" she asked as they walked back to the car. "Do what? Fix my credit score?" "I didn't fix it. I just removed the incorrect information." "What incorrect information?" He gave her a look that suggested she didn't actually want to know the answer. She didn't ask again. On the way back, Marcus's phone rang. He answered it on speaker. "Talk to me." Damien's voice filled the car. "All set. New accounts are active. She's secure." "Good. Any movement from Halston?" "Not yet. But he made a call last night to a private investigator in Jersey. Guy who specializes in finding people who don't want to be found." Elowen's chest tightened. "How do you know that?" she asked. "Because I'm monitoring his phone records," Marcus said, like this was perfectly normal. "That's illegal." "Extremely." "Marcus," Damien's voice came through the speaker, "stay on him. I want to know everywhere he goes, everyone he talks to. If he so much as drives past your building, I want to know about it." "Copy that." The call ended. Elowen sat in silence for a moment, processing. Then, "You're breaking a lot of laws for someone you barely know." Marcus glanced at her. "Damien doesn't do anything halfway. You're under his protection now. That means whatever it takes. Even if it's illegal?" "Especially if it's illegal." He pulled up to the building. "The law doesn't protect people like you fast enough. We do." She didn't know what to say to that. Inside the penthouse, she found herself pacing. The nervous energy that had been building all day needed an outlet, and there was only so much cleaning she could do in a space that was already immaculate. She ended up in Damien's library, a room she usually avoided because it felt too personal. Floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with books that actually looked read. Not decorator pieces. Real books with cracked spines and dog-eared pages. She ran her fingers along the spines. Architecture, urban planning, Roman history, and an entire shelf of fiction that surprised her. Cormac McCarthy, Toni Morrison, Graham Greene. "You can borrow whatever you want." She spun around. Damien stood in the doorway, tie loosened, looking more tired than she'd seen him. "Sorry, I didn't mean to snoop." "You're not snooping. You live here now." The words hung in the air between them. "Temporarily," she corrected. "Sure." But he didn't sound convinced. He crossed to the shelf and pulled down a worn paperback. "You mentioned you were in grad school. What were you studying?" "Urban sociology, before I left." "Why'd you stop?" She'd told him the simple version already, that Victor had wanted her home. But standing in this room, surrounded by books that suggested Damien actually cared about ideas, the real answer came out. "He told me I wasn't smart enough." She stared at the floor. Not directly, but little comments. Questions about my research that made it sound stupid. Concerns that I was wasting money on a degree I'd never finish. After a while, I started to believe him. You believed a hedge fund manager about academic worth? When someone tells you something often enough, it starts to sound true. Damien handed her the paperback, The Power Broker by Robert Caro. Read this, he said. Then tell me if you still think you're not smart enough. Sigh. She took it, surprised by the weight of it. This is like 1,000 pages. It's also the best book ever written about how cities actually work. You'll love it. He paused. And when you're done, we're going to talk about you going back to school. Damien, not now, later, when Halston's not a problem anymore. He moved toward the door. Dinner's at 7. Hope you like Thai food. He was gone before she could argue. She stood there holding the book and trying not to cry. Dinner was strange in a way Elowen hadn't anticipated. They sat at the kitchen island, the formal dining room apparently reserved for people Damien actually wanted to impress, with takeout containers spread between them, pad thai and green curry and spring rolls that were still crispy. It felt almost normal. You don't eat here often, do you? She asked. What gave it away? The fact that you had to ask the delivery guy where your building was. He laughed, actually laughed. It transformed his whole face, made him look younger. I usually eat at my desk, or in meetings, or not at all. That's terrible for you. So I've been told. He handed her the spring rolls. You cook? I used to, when I had time. You have time now. It was true, with no apartment to maintain, no Victor to tiptoe around, no constant low-grade panic about where he might show up. She had time. The thought was dizzying. What do you do? She asked. When you're not working. I work. Come on, there has to be something. He considered this. I run, early mornings before the city wakes up, and I read. The library made that obvious. What about you? What did you do before? Before. Such a loaded word. I painted, she said quietly. Watercolors. Nothing fancy. Just, it helped me think. You have your supplies? They're in storage now, I guess. With everything else. Marcus can get them tomorrow. You don't have to. Elowen. He set down his fork. Stop telling me what I don't have to do. I'm going to do it anyway. She met his eyes. Why? Because someone should have done it a long time ago. The answer was simple and devastating. They finished eating in comfortable silence. Elowen cleaned up while Damien took a call in his office. She could hear his voice through the door, sharp, impatient, dealing with something about permits and city inspectors. She was loading the dishwasher when her new phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her hands froze. It couldn't be Victor. He didn't have this number, unless... She answered. Hello? Elowen? It's Claire. Relief flooded through her. How'd you get this number? Damien's assistant called me, said you'd changed phones. A pause. Elle, who is this guy? He sent someone to my apartment with a security system, an actual security system, said it was in case Victor came back. He's my boss. Your boss doesn't install security systems for his employees' families. What's going on? Elowen glanced toward Damien's office. It's complicated. Are you safe? Yeah, safer than I've been in months. That's not an answer. Claire. Elowen sat down at the counter. He's helping me. Really helping. I know it sounds weird, but I trust him. Her sister was quiet for a long moment. Okay, but if anything feels wrong, you call me. Immediately. I will. I promise. They talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. When Elowen looked up, Damien was standing in the kitchen doorway. Your sister okay? He asked. She thinks you're either a saint or a serial killer. Probably both. He grabbed a water from the fridge. Marcus flagged something. Halston made contact with a bail bondsman this afternoon. Guy who works with people who need to disappear quickly. Her stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means he's planning something, and he's hiring professionals to help him do it. What kind of something? Damien's expression went carefully neutral. I don't know yet, but we're going to find out before he can execute it. How? Let me worry about that part. He checked his watch. You should get some sleep. Tomorrow might be complicated. Damien, he stopped. Thank you. for all of this. I know I keep saying it, but then stop saying it. His voice was gentle. You don't owe me gratitude. You don't owe me anything. He disappeared into his office again before she could respond. Elowen went to bed but didn't sleep. She lay in the dark, the power broker on the nightstand, and thought about the last 48 hours. Her entire life had been upended. Again. But this time, it didn't feel like drowning. It felt like someone had finally thrown her a rope. Victor's plan came together quickly once he made the decision. He couldn't go after Elowen directly, not with whoever was watching him. But there were other ways to apply pressure, ways that didn't leave fingerprints. The bail bondsman connected him with someone who specialized in reputation management, a polite term for destroying someone's life without technically breaking any laws. I need information on someone, Victor said during their call. He was using a burner phone now, being careful. Damian Crowe, Manhattan real estate developer. I know who he is. Can you get his financial records, business dealings, anything that might be questionable? For the right price. They negotiated. Victor wired the money through an account that couldn't be traced back to him. 2 days later, he received a file. And it was beautiful. Damian Crowe might look clean on the surface, but dig deeper, and there were cracks. Construction projects that got approved despite neighborhood opposition. Buildings that went up faster than permits should have allowed. Connections to contractors with ties to organized crime. Nothing directly actionable, but enough to raise questions, enough to cause problems. Victor drafted an anonymous email to the city's building department, then another to an investigative reporter who'd been trying to make a name for himself, then one more to Crowe's biggest competitor. He didn't send them yet. These were insurance, leverage. If Crowe wanted to play games, Victor would remind him that everyone had secrets. Everyone had something to lose. He pulled up Elowen's photo on his computer, the one from their engagement party, where she was laughing at something he'd said, looking at him like he was the answer to everything. She'd learn. They always did. You don't walk away from Victor Halston without consequences. Damian knew something was coming before Marcus confirmed it. He'd spent 20 years in a business where reading people's intentions kept you alive. And Victor Halston's silence over the past few days wasn't surrender. It was planning. He hired someone, Russ, Marcus said, walking into Damian's office at midnight. PI out of Newark, ex-cop, got fired for falsifying evidence. Now he digs up dirt for divorce lawyers and corporate espionage. What's his target? You. Damian leaned back in his chair. Show me. Marcus pulled up a file on his tablet. Bank records, project files. Photos of Damian with people who'd be hard to explain to federal investigators. How'd they get this? The PI's good, better than I gave him credit for. Marcus scrolled through more pages. None of it's actionable on its own, but together, it paints a picture. Of what? A developer who cuts corners and doesn't ask questions about where his financing comes from. It was true enough to be dangerous. Damian had built his empire by being willing to work with people banks wouldn't touch, contractors who got things done without worrying about safety inspections. Investors whose money came from sources nobody wanted to examine too closely. He'd always known it could come back to bite him. He just hadn't expected it to happen because he'd helped a woman escape her abusive ex. What's Halston planning to do with it? Damian asked. That's the interesting part. He hasn't done anything yet, just collected it. Marcus closed the tablet. My guess? He's waiting to see what you do next. This is a warning shot. He wants me to back off. He wants you to understand that protecting Elowen comes with a cost. Damian stood and walked to the window. The city spread out below him, all light and steel and endless possibility. He'd fought for every inch of this view, had built something from nothing through sheer force of will and strategic ruthlessness. And Victor Halston thought that would make him back down. Increase surveillance on him, Damian said. So, Baudet, I want to know every move he makes, every person he talks to, every coffee he buys. That's going to get expensive. I don't care. Damian, Marcus's voice was careful. This is escalating, fast. Maybe it's time to think about alternative solutions. Like what? Like making him disappear, permanently. The offer hung in the air between them. Damian had made people disappear before. Not personally, he wasn't a killer, but he knew people who were. Professionals who could make a problem vanish without leaving evidence. It would be easy, clean, final, and it would destroy Elowin. No, he said. He's not going to stop. I know. So what's the play? Damien turned back to Marcus. We make him understand that some fights aren't worth winning. How? I'm working on it. After Marcus left, Damien sat in the dark and thought about his mother. She'd survived his father by disappearing completely. New name, new city, new life. She'd given up everything, including her son, to stay safe. It had worked, but the cost had been devastating. Elowin deserved better than that. She deserved to reclaim her life, not abandon it, which meant Victor Halston needed to be stopped, not just warned or threatened. Stopped. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Halston just left his apartment, heading downtown. You want me to follow? Damien typed back, yes. And Marcus? Don't let him see you. Never do. Damien stood and walked down the hall, stopped outside Elowin's door, no light underneath. She was probably asleep. He hoped so, because tomorrow things were going to get worse before they got better, and she needed to be ready. The flowers arrived at 9 a.m., 24 white roses in a crystal vase, delivered to the penthouse lobby with a card that simply read, I forgive you. Elowin stared at them through the security monitor while Marcus stood beside her, arms crossed. Don't touch them, he said. I wasn't planning to. I'm serious. We need to check for cameras, trackers, anything that shouldn't be there. She turned away from the monitor. It's just flowers. Nothing from him is just anything. Marcus pulled out his phone. I'm having them sent to a lab. If they're clean, I'll bring them back up. I don't want them back. Good call. Damien emerged from his office, still on a call, and stopped when he saw Marcus examining the delivery slip. He said something curt into the phone and hung up. Halston? He asked. Marcus nodded. How'd he get this address? That's what I'm going to find out. Marcus headed for the door. Keep her inside until I get back. The door closed with a solid click. Elowin sat down on the couch, suddenly exhausted despite having just woken up. He's not going to stop. No, Damien agreed. He's not. So what do? We make him wish he had. There was something in his voice that made her look up, something cold and final that she hadn't heard before. Damien, what are you planning? Nothing you need to worry about. That's not an answer. He came around the couch and sat beside her. Not close enough to crowd, but close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his face. Victor Halston has spent his entire life believing that money and connections make him untouchable. I'm going to teach him otherwise. How? By being better at his game than he is. And if that doesn't work, his expression didn't change. It will work. But Elowin heard what he wasn't saying. If it didn't work, there were other options, darker ones. I don't want you doing anything illegal, she said quietly. Too late for that. I'm serious. So am I. He leaned back, studying her. You think I got where I am by following every rule? This city doesn't work that way. You want something done, you do what needs doing. Even if it destroys you in the process? I'm harder to destroy than you think. She wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him that Victor wasn't worth the risk, that she could just disappear, change her name, start over somewhere else. But the words wouldn't come because she was tired of running, tired of being afraid. And maybe for the first time in years, she wanted to see what happened when someone fought back. Marcus returned an hour later with the flowers in a sealed plastic bag. Clean, he said. No cameras, no trackers, no chemical residue. Just expensive roses and a creepy message. So he's just messing with her head, Damien said. That's my read. Marcus tossed the bag into the trash. But we did get something useful. The florist has security footage, shows Halston paying cash, personally selecting the arrangement. He was there for 20 minutes, which means he's not being as careful as he thinks. Exactly. Damien pulled out his phone and made a call. I need a meeting. Tonight. Yeah, that's fine. Bring everything you have. When he hung up, Elowin asked, Who was that? A friend who specializes in making problems go away. What kind of friend? The expensive kind. She didn't push further. Part of her didn't want to know. The day dragged. Elowin tried to stay busy, but there was only so much cleaning she could do in a space that was already immaculate. She ended up back in the library, pulling the power broker off the shelf where she'd left it. She read for 3 hours straight, absorbed in Robert Moses and urban planning and the ways power actually worked in cities. It was dense and brilliant and made her remember why she'd loved her research in the first place. When Damien found her, she was taking notes in the margins. "You're writing in my book," he observed. She looked up, startled. "Sorry, I can—" "Don't apologize. That's how books should be read." He sat in the chair across from her. "What do you think so far?" "I think Moses was a monster who happened to be effective. Most effective people are." "Is that what you are?" The question came out before she could stop it. Damien considered it carefully. "I've done things I'm not proud of, built projects that displaced families, worked with people who solved problems with violence, made compromises that kept me up at night." He paused. "But I've also built housing for people who couldn't afford it otherwise, created jobs, turned neighborhoods around. The world isn't black and white." Victor thought that too, that he was justified. "There's a difference between us." "What's that?" "I know I'm not the hero." He stood. "I'm just someone who gets things done." That night, Damien left the penthouse at 8 p.m. wearing a jacket Elowen had never seen him in. Leather, worn, paired with jeans instead of his usual suit. He looked different, harder. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Meeting? About Victor?" "Among other things." He grabbed his keys. "Marcus is outside if you need anything. Don't answer the door for anyone else." "Damien, I'll be back by midnight." He was gone before she could say anything else. Elowen tried to distract herself with television, but nothing held her attention. She kept checking her phone, expecting another message from Victor, another threat wrapped in concern. But there was nothing. The silence was somehow worse. At 10 p.m., she gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen. Made tea she didn't want. Stared out the window at the city lights and thought about how her life had become unrecognizable in less than a week. Her phone buzzed. She nearly dropped the mug. It was Claire. "Hey," Elowen answered. "Everything okay?" "That's what I was going to ask you." Her sister's voice was tight. "Victor called me." Elowen's chest constricted. "When?" "An hour ago, from a number I didn't recognize. He said he was worried about you, that you'd fallen in with dangerous people, that he just wanted to help." "What did you tell him?" "That he should lose my number before I called the police." Claire paused. He sounded wrong, not angry, just off, like he was reading from a script." "Did he ask where I was?" "No, but he implied he already knew. Said something about Manhattan and making sure you were safe." Another pause. "Who is Damien Crowe?" "Really?" Elowen closed her eyes. "Someone who's trying to help." "By doing what?" "Victor made it sound like you're in danger." "Victor's a liar, you know that." "I know, but I'm still worried." They talked for another 10 minutes, with Elowen trying to reassure her sister while her own anxiety climbed. When she finally hung up, she felt like the walls were closing in. Victor was escalating, reaching out to her family, trying to control the narrative. It was textbook, classic abuser behavior. Isolate the victim, make everyone else doubt her judgment, position yourself as the concerned savior. She'd seen it before, lived through it. But this time was different. This time, she had someone in her corner who understood the game better than Victor did. Damien returned at 11:30, looking tired but satisfied. "Well?" Elowen asked from the couch where she'd been failing to focus on a book. "It's handled." "What's handled?" He poured himself a drink, whiskey, neat, and sat in the chair across from her. "Victor thinks he's playing chess. He's not. He's playing checkers while I'm redesigning the board." "That's cryptic." "That's accurate." He took a sip. "Tomorrow he's going to receive some interesting information about his business practices, the kind of information that makes the SEC very curious. You're setting him up. I'm giving them facts. What they do with those facts is up to them." "That's semantics." "That's strategy." He set down the glass. "Victor Halston has been running illegal trades for 3 years, using insider information to make millions. I'm not inventing evidence. I'm just making sure the right people see what's already there." Elowen stared at him. "How do you know about his trades?" "Because I had someone very talented spend the last 3 days digging through his life." Damien leaned forward. "He's not as clean as he pretends." "Most people aren't." And when the SEC comes after him, he'll be too busy defending himself to worry about you. It was ruthless, calculated, exactly the kind of move that should have scared her. Instead, she felt something else. Relief. He called my sister tonight, she said quietly. Told her I was in danger. Damien's expression went flat. What else did he say? That I'd fallen in with the wrong people. That he was worried. She wrapped her arms around herself. He's trying to turn everyone against me, make them think I'm the problem. Did your sister believe him? No, but others might. Let them. His voice was hard. By the time I'm done, no one's going to believe anything Victor Halston says. The next morning, Victor's world began to collapse. It started with a call from his company's general counsel at 7 a.m. Concerned voice, careful words. The SEC had questions. Informal inquiry, nothing to worry about, but they needed to review some trading records. Victor kept his voice calm. What kind of records? Q3 and Q4 from last year. Some flagged transactions. Flagged how? Timing issues. Purchases made just before major announcements. They want to verify everything was above board. Victor's hands went cold. Of course, send them whatever they need. He hung up and immediately pulled up his trading history. The transactions were clean. He'd been careful. Used multiple accounts, shell companies, brokers who didn't ask questions. There was no paper trail connecting him to the insider information he'd used, except his personal assistant from 2 years ago, the one he'd fired for asking too many questions. She'd had access to his calendar, his calls, his meetings. If someone had talked to her, if she'd kept records. His phone rang again, his lawyer this time. We need to meet, the lawyer said. Someone sent the SEC a very detailed file, trading patterns, meeting notes, recorded phone calls. Victor, this is serious. Who sent it? Anonymous tip, but it's thorough. Too thorough to ignore. Victor ended the call and sat very still. Someone was destroying him. And he had a pretty good idea who. He dialed the private investigator. I need everything you have on Damien Crowe. Now. I sent you the file. I need more. Business associates, properties, anyone who works for him. And I need it today. That's going to cost. I don't care what it costs. He hung up and stared at his computer screen. Damien Crowe thought he could threaten Victor and walk away clean. He was about to learn otherwise. Elowen was in the kitchen making coffee when Damien's phone rang. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she heard his tone change. Sharp, focused. When he emerged from his office, his expression was unreadable. What happened? She asked. SEC just opened a formal investigation into Halston. Should keep him occupied for the next few months. That fast? When you hand them everything they need on a silver platter, they move quickly. He grabbed his jacket. I have to go out. Marcus will stay with you. Where are you going? To make sure Victor understands that this is just the beginning. Damien. He stopped at the door. What? Be careful. Something shifted in his expression. Always am. But after he left, Elowen couldn't shake the feeling that careful wasn't the same as safe. Marcus appeared a few minutes later, settling into the living room with his tablet and a cup of coffee that looked more like motor oil. You drink that? Elowen asked. It keeps me functional. She sat across from him. What's Damien really doing? Marcus looked up. What'd he tell you? That he's making Victor understand this is just the beginning. Then that's what he's doing. That's not helpful. Marcus set down his tablet. Look, I've worked for Damien for 8 years. He's the smartest, most strategic person I've ever met. He doesn't make moves without thinking through every consequence. If he says he's handling it, he's handling it. But what if Victor fights back? Then Damien will be ready. Marcus picked up his coffee again. Trust the process. But trust was hard when you'd spent 2 years with someone who'd systematically destroyed your ability to trust your own judgment. Damien found Victor at his office building in Midtown. He didn't schedule an appointment, just walked past the receptionist like he owned the place and took the elevator to the 42nd floor. Victor's assistant tried to stop him. Mr. Crowe, you can't. I can. Damien walked past her and into Victor's office without knocking. Victor was on the phone. He looked up, startled, then annoyed. I'll call you back, he said into the phone and hung up. What the hell are you doing here? Damien closed the door behind him. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. Then listen. Damien sat in the chair across from Victor's desk like he'd been invited. The SEC investigation? That's me. The anonymous tip? Also me. Everything that's about to happen to you? All me. Victor's jaw tightened. You're threatening me. I'm informing you. Damien leaned back. You had a choice. Walk away from Elowen, move on with your life. You chose escalation instead. So now we're here. You don't know who you're dealing with. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A mediocre hedge fund manager with a god complex who thinks money makes him invincible. Damien's voice stayed conversational. But here's the thing, Victor. I have more money than you, more connections, more willingness to do what it takes. You're out of your depth. You can't prove anything. I don't have to. The SEC does that for me. And even if they don't, I have 6 other strategies ready to go. Legal troubles, reputation damage, business deals falling through. By the time I'm done, no one in this city will touch you. Victor stood. Get out of my office. In a minute, Damien remained seated. You have 24 hours to make a decision. Either you disappear from Elowen's life completely, no calls, no flowers, no surveillance, or I release everything else I have. And trust me, what I gave the SEC is just the appetizer. You're bluffing. Damien pulled out his phone and showed Victor a video. Just 10 seconds. Victor, 2 years ago, in what looked like a private room, doing a line of cocaine off a desk while discussing a trade that netted him $3 million. Victor's face went pale. Where did you get that? From someone who understands that secrets are only valuable if you know when to sell them. Damien pocketed the phone. That video gets released, you're not just facing SEC violations, you're facing criminal charges. You wouldn't. Try me. Damien stood. 24 hours, Victor. Walk away, or I bury you. He left before Victor could respond. In the elevator, his hands were shaking. He'd meant every word. Would follow through without hesitation. But the look on Victor's face, cornered, desperate, dangerous, suggested this wasn't over. Marcus was right. This was escalating fast. And escalation meant someone was going to get hurt. Victor sat alone in his office for an hour after Damien left. The video was real. He remembered that night, remembered the rush of the cocaine, the certainty of the trade, the feeling of being untouchable. He'd deleted everything, wiped his computer, destroyed his phone, made sure there was no evidence. But somehow, Damien Crowe had it anyway. The walls were closing in. His lawyer had called twice. The SEC investigation was moving forward. They wanted him to come in for questioning, wanted access to records he couldn't let them see. His board was nervous, his investors asking questions. His reputation, the thing he'd spent 15 years building, crumbling in real time, all because of her. Elowen, who'd looked at him like he hung the moon, who'd believed every lie, who'd been so easy to control. Until she wasn't. Until she'd found those journals and realized what he'd been doing. Until she'd left. He should have let her go. Should have found someone else. There were always more. Women who wanted security, validation, someone to tell them they were special. But he couldn't, because Elowen leaving meant she'd won, and Victor Halston didn't lose. He picked up his phone and made a call. "It's me," he said when the private investigator answered. "I need something else. Not information this time. Something more direct." "How direct?" "I want her scared. I want her to understand that she can't hide behind Damien Crowe forever." A pause. "That's not what I do. I'll pay double your rate." "I don't care about the money. I'm not a thug for hire." "Then find me someone who is." The investigator hung up. Victor sat in the dark office and thought about options. If legal pressure wouldn't work, if threats wouldn't work, there were other ways. Messier ways. He'd never thought of himself as someone who'd crossed that line, but Damien Crowe had just shown him that lines were meaningless when you were fighting for survival. And Victor was very good at surviving. When Damien got back to the penthouse, it was nearly 6 p.m. He found Elowen in the library, surrounded by books and notes, looking more alive than he'd seen her in days. "Research?" he asked from the doorway. She looked up, startled. "I called my old advisor from grad school, just to talk." She smiled, and it looked real. She said my thesis proposal is still on file, that if I wanted to come back, they'd consider it. That's great. It feels impossible, like something that happened to a different person. It happened to you. He came into the room. And it can happen again, after this is over. Her smile faded slightly. Did you see him, Victor? I did. And? And he has 24 hours to walk away. Or I make sure he can't hurt anyone ever again. Elowen stood. Damien, what does that mean? It means I'm done being subtle. He met her eyes. You deserve to live without fear. If that means destroying someone who refuses to leave you alone, that's what I'll do. I don't want you destroying yourself in the process. I won't. You don't know that. He wanted to argue, to tell her he'd handled worse, survived more dangerous situations, come out on top every time. But the truth was, he didn't know. Victor Halston was cornered, and cornered people did desperate things. I'm being careful, he said instead. That's not the same as being safe. No, but it's the best I can offer. They stood there in the library, surrounded by books and fading light, and Elowen realized something. She wasn't just grateful anymore. She was falling for him, for his ruthlessness and his protection and his absolute certainty that she deserved better. It was the worst possible timing, and she didn't care. That night, Victor made his decision. If Damien Crowe wanted war, he'd get war, but on Victor's terms. The 24 hours passed without a word from Victor. Damien wasn't surprised. Men like Victor Halston didn't surrender easily. They regrouped, calculated new angles, found ways to inflict damage when you least expected it. So when Marcus walked into the penthouse at 7 a.m. with his jaw set tight, Damien already knew the news wasn't good. He leaked the file, Marcus said without preamble. Damien looked up from his coffee. Which file? The one on you, construction records, contractor connections, questionable financing. Sent it to 3 investigative journalists and the city's building department. When? Last night, around 2 a.m. Marcus pulled out his tablet and showed him the emails. It's vague enough that he can claim he's a concerned citizen, specific enough to cause problems. Damien scanned the documents. They were real, all of them. Things he'd hoped would stay buried but had always known could surface. Deals made with people who didn't ask questions. Projects pushed through despite opposition. Money that came from sources banks wouldn't touch. Nothing illegal, technically, but enough to trigger investigations that would tie him up for months. Victor had done his homework. What's our exposure, Damien asked. Hard to say. Could be nothing. Could be everything. Marcus sat down across from him. The journalists are already calling. One's from the Times. She's good. Won't let this go without digging deeper. Then we give her something else to dig into. Like what? Victor's business partners, his investors, the people who've made millions off his illegal trades. Damien set down his coffee. If she wants corruption, let's show her where the real corruption is. That's scorched earth. He started it. Marcus nodded slowly. I'll make the calls, but Damien, this is going to get messy. Once we start exposing his network, they'll come after you harder. Let them. From the doorway, Elowen's voice cut through. What's going on? Both men turned. She stood there in pajama pants and one of Damien's t-shirts she'd borrowed, hair pulled back, looking younger than her 26 years. Nothing you need to worry about, Damien said. Don't do that. She came into the kitchen. Don't lie to me like I'm fragile. What happened? Marcus glanced at Damien, who nodded. Victor leaked information about Damien's business dealings, Marcus explained. It's causing problems. What kind of problems? The kind that involve investigations and lawyers and months of headaches. Damien kept his voice calm. But it's manageable. This is because of me. Elowen's face had gone pale. He's going after you because you helped me. He's going after me because he's a vindictive coward who can't accept losing. Damien stood. This isn't your fault. Yes, it is. I should leave. Go somewhere else. Disappear like your mother did. No. The word came out harder than he intended. Elowen flinched. Damien crossed to her, forcing himself to soften his tone. You're not running. Not from him, not from this. We're ending this. Permanently. How? He's not going to stop until he destroys both of us. then we destroy him first." The declaration hung in the air between them. Marcus quietly excused himself, leaving them alone in the kitchen. Elowen wrapped her arms around herself. "I don't want you getting hurt because of me." "Too late for that." Damien moved closer, carefully. "I made my choice when I helped you. Knew it might cost me. Still worth it." "Why?" "Because you deserve better than spending your life afraid." He reached out, hesitated, then tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "And because somewhere along the way, this stopped being about doing the right thing and became about you." She looked up at him, eyes wide. "Damien!" His phone rang. He cursed under his breath and checked the screen. "I have to take this." He stepped away, leaving Elowen in the kitchen trying to process what he'd just said. Somewhere along the way, this became about you. The call was from his lawyer, and it was exactly as bad as expected. The building department wanted records going back 5 years. The Times reporter was already reaching out to his contractors. 2 city council members were making noise about investigations. Victor's revenge was thorough. "How long can you stall them?" Damien asked. "Maybe a week, 2 if we're lucky." His lawyer sighed. "But Damien, if they find what I think they'll find, you're looking at fines, maybe worse. Then make sure they don't find it. That's not how this works. Make it work." He ended the call before the lawyer could argue further. When he returned to the kitchen, Elowen was making breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee that actually smelled decent. Normal things that felt surreal given the circumstances. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I need to do something." She flipped an egg with more force than necessary. "I can't just sit here while Victor tears your life apart. He's trying. There's a difference." "Is there?" She turned to face him. "What happens if the city finds something? If the investigations go somewhere?" "Then I'd deal with it." He leaned against the counter. "I've been playing this game a long time. Victor's smart, but he's not patient. He'll make a mistake." "And if he doesn't?" Damien didn't answer because he didn't have a good one. The truth was, Victor's move had been calculated, damaging without being traceable, the kind of thing that could unravel years of work while keeping his own hands clean. They ate breakfast in tense silence. Elowen kept glancing at him like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Damien was grateful for the quiet. He needed to think, strategize, figure out the next move. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Victor just left his apartment, heading to a law office in Chelsea. "Want me to follow?" Damien typed back, "Yes, and see if you can find out who he's meeting with." "Is that Marcus?" Elowen asked. "Yeah, he's tracking Victor's movements." "Is that legal?" "Probably not." She set down her fork. "Damien, I need you to be honest with me. How bad is this really?" He considered lying, telling her it was fine, manageable, nothing to worry about, but she'd been lied to enough. "Bad," he admitted. "If the city digs deep enough, they'll find things I can't explain away easily. Contractors with criminal records, financing from offshore accounts, permits that got approved too quickly." So Victor was right. You do cut corners. Yes, because that's how things get built in this city. You think affordable housing projects happen because everyone follows every rule? He shook his head. The system's designed to protect people with money and power. If you want to actually help people who need it, sometimes you have to work around that system. That sounds like justification. It is justification. Doesn't make it wrong. Elowen studied him for a long moment. You really believe that? I've seen what happens when you play by all the rules. Nothing changes. Nothing gets built. People keep suffering while bureaucrats argue about paperwork. He stood, carrying his plate to the sink. I'd rather be effective and slightly dirty than pure and useless. Victor thought the same thing about his trading. Victor hurt people for profit. I bend rules to build homes. Damien turned to face her. There's a difference. Is there? The question hit harder than it should have, because maybe there wasn't as much difference as he wanted to believe. Maybe they were both just men who decided their goals justified their methods. The only real difference was who got hurt in the process. I'm not him, Damien said quietly. I'm not. I know. Elowen came closer. But I also know that what he's doing right now, the investigations, the leaks, all of it, that's my fault. And I can't live with that. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe I should talk to him, Try to make him stop. Absolutely not. Damien, no. His voice was flat, final. That's exactly what he wants. To isolate you again, get you alone, make you think you can fix this by sacrificing yourself. I won't let that happen. You can't stop me. Watch me. They stared at each other across the kitchen. Two stubborn people who'd both spent too long being controlled by someone else. Finally, Elowen said, I'm not your prisoner. No, but you're under my protection. And that means I get to veto plans that put you in danger. That's not fair. Life's not fair. You of all people should know that. It was a low blow, and he knew it. Elowen's face went tight. That was cruel, she said quietly. That was true. But he felt the guilt anyway. Look, I'm sorry, but I'm not letting you walk back into his orbit. Not after everything. Then what do? We wait for him to make a mistake. And if he doesn't, he will. They always do. But Damien wasn't as confident as he sounded. Victor's meeting in Chelsea was with a crisis management firm that specialized in protecting wealthy clients from scandals. He sat across from a woman named Patricia Chen, who had a reputation for being ruthless and effective in equal measure. She'd saved senators from sex scandals, CEOs from fraud allegations, celebrities from career-ending mistakes. If anyone could navigate the SEC investigation and Damien Crow's counterattack, it was her. I've reviewed your situation, Patricia said, tapping a tablet. It's complicated. Can you fix it? I can minimize the damage. But you need to understand something, Mr. Halston. The SEC investigation is real. They have evidence. My job isn't to make that go away. It's to control the narrative around it. What does that mean? It means we position you as a reformer, someone who made mistakes early in his career but has since changed. We get you in front of cameras, doing charity work, talking about financial ethics. We make the public see you as human. That sounds like admitting guilt. That sounds like surviving. Patricia leaned forward. The alternative is fighting this publicly, losing in court, and spending the next decade rebuilding your reputation from prison. Which would you prefer? Victor's jaw tightened. What about Damien Crow? What about him? He's the one who started this. I want him buried. Patricia's expression didn't change. That's not what I do. I protect clients. I don't destroy their enemies. Then find me someone who does. Mr. Halston, I strongly advise against escalating this situation further. Crow has resources, connections, and clearly no qualms about using them. Going after him directly will only make things worse. So I'm supposed to just accept this? You're supposed to be smart. She stood. My retainer is $50,000. If you want my help, you'll focus on saving yourself rather than destroying someone else. If you can't do that, find another firm. She left without waiting for an answer. Victor sat alone in the conference room, staring at the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. Patricia was right. The smart play was to cut his losses, manage the fallout, rebuild. But Victor hadn't built his career by being smart. He'd built it by being willing to do what others wouldn't. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Heard you need help with a problem. I can provide solutions. Cash only, no questions. Victor stared at the message for a long time. This was a line. Cross it, and there was no going back. But Damien Crow had already crossed so many lines, had threatened him, exposed him, tried to destroy everything he'd built. Turnabout was fair play. He typed back, how much and how fast? The response came immediately. $100,000, 2 days. Victor transferred the money from an account that couldn't be traced back to him. Then he sat back and waited. That afternoon, Elowen's painting supplies arrived. Marcus brought them up in boxes that looked like they'd been carefully packed by professionals. Brushes, paints, paper, everything organized and labeled. Thank you, Elowen said, genuinely touched. Marcus just nodded and left. She set up in the guest room she'd been staying in, spreading supplies across the desk. It had been 6 months since she'd painted, since she'd done anything creative that wasn't practical or survival-focused. She started with simple washes, blue bleeding into gray, testing colors, remembering techniques, letting her hands remember what her mind had tried to forget. After an hour, something shifted. The painting stopped being about technique and became about release. She painted Victor. Not his face, but the feeling of him. Sharp angles in red and black, shapes that pressed in from all sides. A figure in the center, small and colorless, being crushed. Then she painted over it, layer by layer, covering the darkness with lighter colors. Greens and golds and finally white, not erasing what was underneath, but transforming it. By the time Damien found her, she had paint on her hands, her clothes, somehow in her hair. "You look like you murdered a rainbow," he said from the doorway. She laughed, actually laughed. "It's therapeutic. Can I see?" She hesitated, then nodded. He came closer, studying the canvas. It was abstract but emotional. You could feel the violence underneath, the transformation on top. "It's powerful," he said finally. "It's messy. Most powerful things are." He looked at her instead of the painting. "You're getting better at handling this." "I'm getting angrier. That's different." "Anger's good. Means you're not scared anymore." "I'm still scared." She set down her brush. "I'm just tired of letting that be the only thing I feel." He understood that, had spent his own life turning fear into fuel, using it to build instead of letting it paralyze. Marcus texted, he said. Victor met with a crisis management firm, probably getting advice on handling the SEC investigation. "That's good, right? Means he's focused on his own problems." "Maybe." But Damien's instincts were screaming otherwise. Or it means he's covering his bases before he makes another move. "Like what?" "I don't know yet." Elowin turned to face him fully. "You're worried. I'm cautious. There's a difference." "Damien." She put a paint-stained hand on his arm. "Tell me the truth." He looked at where her hand rested on his sleeve, then met her eyes. "Victor's cornered, desperate. That makes him dangerous in ways I can't fully predict. So yeah, I'm worried, but I'm also prepared." "For what?" "For whatever comes next." What came next arrived 36 hours later. Damien was in a meeting downtown when Marcus called. He almost didn't answer. He was negotiating a deal that had taken weeks to set up, but something about the third call in a row made him excuse himself. "What is it?" "Get back to the penthouse. Now." Marcus's voice was tight, in a way Damien had only heard twice before. Both times someone had ended up in the hospital. "What happened?" "Just get here." Damien left the meeting without explanation, caught a cab that moved too slowly through midday traffic, and burst into the penthouse to find Marcus and two uniformed police officers in his living room. Elowin was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket despite the apartment being warm, looking small and shaken. "What the hell happened?" Damien demanded. One of the officers turned. "You're Damien Crowe?" "Yes." "Someone tell me what's going on." "There was an incident this afternoon. A man attempted to enter the building claiming to be Miss Mercer's brother. Security stopped him, but he became aggressive. Made threats." Damien looked at Marcus, who nodded confirmation. "Show me the footage," Damien said. They pulled it up on Marcus's tablet. A man in his 30s, average height, dark jacket. He'd shown up at the lobby desk asking for Elowin by name. When the security guard asked for ID, he'd gotten agitated, started yelling about needing to see his sister, that she was in danger. The guard had called the police. The man had run. "Did you get a clear shot of his face?" Damien asked. "Yeah, running facial recognition now." Marcus zoomed in on the clearest frame. "But I'd bet money he's whoever Victor hired to scare her." "I don't have a brother," Elowin said quietly from the couch. "He knows that. Victor knows that." Damien sat beside her, careful to give her space. "Did you see him?" She shook her head. "Marcus got me into the back room before he could, but I heard him. The things he was saying." Her voice cracked. "He knew things. About me. About where I used to live, my sister's name." "Information Victor gave him," Marcus said. The police officers took statements, promised to increase patrols around the building, and left with copies of the security footage. Once they were gone, Marcus pulled up more information on his tablet. The guy's name is Derek Klein, low-level enforcer, usually works debt collection, intimidation, that kind of thing. Not particularly smart, but willing to get physical. "How'd you find him so fast?" Damien asked. "He's got priors. Face recognition matched him to an arrest record from 2 years ago." Marcus showed them the mugshot. Victor hired muscle, which means he's moving from psychological warfare to actual threats. Elowin pulled the blanket tighter. He's escalating. Yeah. Damien's voice was flat. Which means we're done playing defense. What are you going to do? Elowin asked. He didn't answer directly, just pulled out his phone and made a call. It's me, he said when someone answered. I need that favor, tonight. The person on the other end said something Elowin couldn't hear. I don't care about the cost. Get it done. Damien hung up and looked at Marcus. Find Derek Klein. I want to have a conversation with him. What kind of conversation? The kind that makes him understand exactly what happens to people who threaten what's mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have bothered Elowin. Instead, it made her feel safer than she had in days. Marcus left to track down Derek Klein. The officers had promised to look for him, but Damien knew they'd never find him first. Marcus had connections the police didn't, methods they couldn't use. By nightfall, they'd have an address. Elowin had moved to the kitchen, making tea she probably wouldn't drink. Her hands were shaking. Damien came up behind her, careful not to startle her. You okay? No. She set down the kettle. I keep thinking, what if security hadn't stopped him? What if he'd gotten up here? He didn't. But he could have, and next time, there won't be a next time. Damien turned her around to face him. I'm ending this. Tonight. How? By making sure Victor understands that touching you means losing everything. His hands were gentle on her arms despite the steel in his voice. He wants to play with violence? Fine. But he's going to learn I'm better at it than he is. Damien, you can't. You'll get arrested. Not if it's done right. That's not reassuring. He almost smiled. I'm not trying to be reassuring. I'm trying to keep you safe. What if I told you to stop, to just let it go? Let me disappear somewhere else. I'd ignore you. That's not your decision to make. Yeah, it is. His voice softened. Because I'm not letting you spend your life running. You deserve better than that. Elowin looked up at him, this man who'd appeared in her life like something out of a crime novel, dangerous and protective and completely certain of his own righteousness. She should have been afraid of him. Instead, she reached up and kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't thought through, just an impulse born from fear and gratitude and something deeper she wasn't ready to name. Damien froze for half a second. Then his hands moved to her waist, and he kissed her back with an intensity that made her knees weak. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elowin said, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. Don't apologize. His thumb traced her jawline. But we need to talk about this. After. When Victor's not a threat anymore. What if there's no after? There will be. He said it like a promise. I'm making sure of it. His phone buzzed. Marcus, with an address. Damien pulled away reluctantly. I have to go. Where? To have a conversation with Derek Klein about the cost of poor career choices. Damien, stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except Marcus. He was already moving toward the door. I'll be back by midnight. And if you're not? He looked back at her, and for just a moment, his certainty faltered. Then Marcus will take care of you. The door closed behind him, leaving Elowin alone with her fear and the ghost of a kiss that changed everything. Derek Klein lived in a walk-up in Queens that smelled like mildew and old pizza. 3rd floor, apartment 3C, door that looked like it had been kicked in before and poorly repaired. Damien stood in the hallway with Marcus, listening to the television blaring through the thin walls. He's alone, Marcus confirmed, checking his phone. No one else has gone in or out in the last hour. Good. Damien knocked. 3 sharp raps that echoed in the stairwell. The television went silent. Footsteps approached. Who is it? Someone who wants to talk about Victor Halston, Damien said. A pause. Then the sound of multiple locks being undone. Derek opened the door with a baseball bat in his hand. He was exactly what the mugshot suggested, average in every way except for the meanness in his eyes. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. Yeah, you do. Damien didn't move. You showed up at my building this afternoon, tried to intimidate someone I care about. We need to discuss why that was a mistake. Derek's grip tightened on the bat. Get lost before I call the cops. The same cops who are looking for you right now? Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Derek the APB that had been issued. Assault, terroristic threats, attempted breaking and entering. You're looking at real time if they find you. I didn't do anything. Security footage says otherwise. Damien finally stepped forward, forcing Derek to either swing or back up. Derek backed up. But here's the thing. I'm not interested in getting you arrested. I'm interested in making sure you never work for Victor Halston again. Man, I don't know who that is. The guy who paid you $100,000 to scare Elowen Mercer. Damien walked into the apartment without invitation. It was exactly as depressing as he'd expected. See, I know about the payment, know which account it came from, how it was laundered, where it ended up. So let's skip the denials and get to the part where you tell me exactly what Victor hired you to do. Derek looked at Marcus, who'd positioned himself between Derek and the door, looked at the bat in his hands like he was considering his odds. Don't, Marcus said quietly. You won't like how that ends. Derek set down the bat. Smart choice, Damien said. Now talk. It took 20 minutes and some persuasive conversation, but Derek eventually gave up everything. Victor had hired him through an intermediary, a lawyer who specialized in deniable transactions. The job was simple. Scare Elowen enough that she'd leave New York. Make her understand she wasn't safe anywhere in the city. Today was supposed to be just a preview, a way to let her know someone was watching. The real work would come later. What kind of real work? Damien asked, his voice dangerously calm. Derek shifted uncomfortably. He wanted me to grab her, take her somewhere quiet, make her call you and beg you to back off the SEC thing. And after she made the call? I wasn't supposed to hurt her, just scare her bad enough that she'd mean it. Damien felt Marcus tense beside him, felt his own hands curl into fists. Where were you supposed to take her? He asked. Storage unit in the Bronx. Halston rented it last week under a fake name. Marcus was already typing on his phone, pulling up rental records. Got it, he said after a moment. Bronx self-storage. Unit 447. Damien looked at Derek. You're going to call Victor. Tell him the job's done, that you have her. What? No way, man. You're going to do it because the alternative is I hand you over to the police with enough evidence to put you away for a decade. Damien's voice was ice. Or I let Marcus handle you his way. Your choice. Derek looked at Marcus, who smiled without warmth. Fine, Derek said. What do you want me to say? They rehearsed it twice. Derek would call Victor, confirm he had Elowen, and arrange to meet at the storage unit in 2 hours. Victor would come because he'd want to see her fear himself, want to be there when she broke. Damien would be waiting. Derek made the call on speaker. His voice shook slightly, but he got through it. Victor answered on the second ring. Is it done? Yeah, got her. She's scared out of her mind. Where? The storage unit, like you said, but man, she's crying pretty hard. You sure you don't want me to just... I'll be there in an hour. Victor's voice was tight with anticipation. Don't let her see your face. Keep her blindfolded. Got it. The line went dead. Damien looked at Derek. You're going to disappear now. Leave the city. I don't care where you go, but if I see you again, if you contact Halston again, if you so much as think about Elowen Mercer, Marcus will find you. Understand? Derek nodded frantically. Good. Now get out. Derek grabbed a duffel bag that looked like it was always packed for quick exits and ran. Marcus watched him go. Think he'll actually leave? Don't care. By tomorrow he'll have bigger problems than us. Damien pulled out his phone. Call the contacts we need for the storage unit. I want this handled cleanly. How clean? Clean enough that Victor can't claim he was set up, but messy enough that he understands what happens when you threaten what's mine. While Marcus made arrangements, Damien called the penthouse. Elowen answered on the first ring. Are you okay? I'm fine, but I need you to trust me about something. What? Victor thinks Derek has you. He's meeting him at a storage unit in the Bronx in 90 minutes. I'm going to be there instead. He heard her sharp intake of breath. Damien, that's a trap. If he's desperate enough to hire someone to kidnap me, he's desperate enough to make mistakes. And I'm going to make sure this is his last one. He paused. But I need you to stay put. No matter what happens, no matter what you hear, stay in the penthouse until I come back. What if you don't come back? I will. You can't promise that. Yeah, I can, because I'm not done with you yet. The words hung between them, loaded with everything they hadn't said. "Be careful," Elowen whispered. "Always am." He hung up before she could argue further. The storage facility was exactly as grim as expected. Rows of identical orange doors, fluorescent lights that flickered, the smell of rust and neglect. Unit 447 was in the back corner, away from the main office and security cameras. Victor had chosen well. Marcus had arrived first, setting up in a unit across the corridor with a camera and clear sightlines. Two other men, professionals Damien had worked with before, were positioned at the exits. The facility manager had been convinced to take a long dinner break. Damien stood inside Unit 447, which was empty except for a metal chair and some rope Derek had apparently prepared. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed like an angry wasp. He checked his watch. 7 minutes until Victor was supposed to arrive. His phone buzzed. A text from Elowen. "Come back safe. Please." He typed back, "I will, promise." Then he heard footsteps in the corridor. Victor appeared in the doorway alone, looking around the empty unit with confusion that quickly turned to suspicion. "Where is she?" he demanded. "Safe." Damien stepped out from behind the door. "Somewhere you'll never touch her again." Victor spun around, hand moving toward his pocket. "I wouldn't," Damien said. "You've got 3 cameras on you right now and 2 very large men blocking the exits. Whatever you're reaching for, it's not going to help." Victor's hand stopped. "This is kidnapping. I'll have you arrested." "For what? Meeting you at a storage unit you rented under a fake name? With rope and a chair you had delivered yesterday?" Damien smiled without humor. "Try again." "Derek called me. Said he had Elowen. Derek works for me now. Has for the last 2 hours. Told me everything about your plan. The kidnapping, the forced call, all of it." Damien crossed his arms. "You hired someone to abduct a woman. That's a felony. Multiple felonies, actually." Victor's face had gone pale. "You can't prove anything." "Wire transfer from your offshore account to Derek's. Text messages arranging the meet. His testimony about exactly what you hired him to do." Damien pulled out his phone and showed Victor the evidence Marcus had compiled. "I can prove everything. This is entrapment. This is you making the stupidest decision of your life." Damien pocketed the phone. "You had a choice. Walk away, deal with the SEC, rebuild your reputation. Instead, you escalated to violence. Now you're done. You're bluffing. You won't go to the police." "You're right. I won't." Damien's voice went colder. "But the FBI will be very interested in this, especially when it's packaged with everything else we have on you. The illegal trades, the insider information, the offshore accounts. Add a kidnapping conspiracy to that list, and you're looking at 20 years minimum." Victor's composure finally cracked. "What do you want?" "I want you to disappear from Elowen's life permanently. No calls, no flowers, no surveillance. You don't ask about her, don't think about her, don't breathe in her direction. And if I do that, then maybe the FBI doesn't get this file." Damien moved closer. "But understand something, Victor. This isn't a negotiation. You don't have leverage. You don't have options. You have one chance to walk away before I bury you so deep you'll never see daylight again." "You're a hypocrite," Victor spat. "Lecturing me about breaking rules when you've done worse." "Probably. But I don't pretend to be anything other than what I am." Damien leaned in. "You built a whole life on lies. Convinced yourself you were special, that you deserve to control people. But you're not special, Victor. You're just another mediocre man who mistakes cruelty for strength." The words hit their target. Victor's face flushed with rage and humiliation. "She'll come back to me," he said. "Eventually. They always do." "No." Damien's voice was absolute. "She won't. Because unlike you, I'm going to give her the one thing you never could." "What's that?" "A choice." He nodded to Marcus, who emerged from the unit across the hall with his camera. "We're done here," Damien said. "You have 48 hours to accept the SEC's plea deal and resign from your firm. After that, this recording and everything else we have goes to the FBI. Understood?" Victor said nothing, just stared at Damien with hatred so pure it was almost tangible. "I'll take that as a yes." Damien walked past him toward the exit. "Oh, and Victor, if you're thinking about trying something stupid out of revenge, don't, Because next time I won't be this generous. He left Victor standing in the empty storage unit, surrounded by evidence of his own worst impulses. Outside, Marcus fell into step beside him. Think he'll actually back down? He doesn't have a choice. Damien pulled out his phone and made a call. It's done. Send the package to the FBI if he doesn't resign within 48 hours. Copy that, the voice on the other end confirmed. They drove back to Manhattan in silence. Damien stared out the window at the city lights and thought about the line he'd just crossed, the threats he'd made, the leverage he'd used to back Victor into a corner. He'd meant every word about not being the hero. But somewhere in the last week, this had stopped being about doing the right thing and become about protecting someone who mattered, about protecting Elowen. The penthouse was dark when he got back except for a single lamp in the living room. Elowen was curled up on the couch with a book she clearly wasn't reading. She looked up when he walked in. You're back. Told you I would be. She set down the book and stood. Is it over? Yeah, it's over. What happened? He told her everything. The confrontation, the evidence, the ultimatum. She listened without interrupting, her face cycling through emotions he couldn't quite read. When he finished, she said, So he's just gone? Just like that? Just like that. He'll take the SEC deal, resign quietly, maybe spend a few years rebuilding somewhere else. But he won't bother you again. How can you be sure? Because I made it very clear what happens if he does. Damien moved closer. And because men like Victor are fundamentally cowards, they only fight battles they know they can win. This one, he lost. Elowen wrapped her arms around herself. I don't know what to feel. I thought I'd be relieved, but I just feel empty. That's normal. You've been running on adrenaline for months. Now that the threat's gone, you're crashing. Is that what happened to your mother after she escaped? The question caught him off guard. Yeah, she said it took her 2 years to stop looking over her shoulder, to believe she was actually safe. 2 years, Elowen repeated quietly. But you don't have to do it alone, that's the difference. She looked up at him. What happens now? Now you get to decide what you want. Without fear, without pressure. Just, what do you want? It was such a simple question, one she hadn't been asked in so long. I want to go back to school, she said slowly. Finish my degree. Maybe teach eventually. Done. I'll make some calls, get you reinstated. Damien, you can't just... Yes, I can. And I will. He moved closer. What else? I want to stop being afraid all the time. Stop jumping at every noise. Stop checking over my shoulder. That'll take time, but you'll get there. I want... She stopped, struggling with the words. What? I want to understand why you did all this. Really? Because it's more than just helping an employee. Damien was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because somewhere between you breaking down in my kitchen and now you became important to me, more important than I planned for. That's not an answer. That's the only answer I have. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear like he'd done before. I'm not good at this. At feelings and relationships and normal things. I'm good at solving problems and building things and being ruthless when I need to be. You're better at feelings than you think. Maybe. Or maybe you just bring it out in me. She smiled slightly. That sounds like something from a movie. Life's stranger than movies, he paused. We need to talk about what happened earlier, the kiss. Her face flushed. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have... Stop apologizing. His thumb traced her jawline. But I need to know if it was just adrenaline or if... She kissed him again. This time it wasn't desperate or impulsive. It was certain. A choice made freely, without fear or obligation. When they broke apart, Damien said, Okay, that answers that. I'm still a mess, Elowen warned. I've got trauma and trust issues, and I'm going to have bad days where I can't function. I've got illegal business practices and a tendency to solve problems with money and threats. We're both disasters. That's romantic. That's honest. He pulled her closer. But if you want to figure it out together, I'm willing to try. Even though I work for you? You're fired, she laughed. You can't fire me. I just did. Consider this your termination notice. He was smiling now, really smiling. But I'd like you to stay anyway. Not as an employee, as someone who lives here because they want to. I can't just live here for free. Why not? I own the building. That's not how things work, Damien. It's how they work for us. His voice softened. Look, I'm not asking you to decide tonight. Take time. Figure out what you need, but know that you have a place here for as long as you want it. She rested her forehead against his chest. This is crazy. Most good things are. They stood there for a long time, neither quite ready to let go. The next morning, Victor Halston sat in his home office staring at his phone. 48 hours to resign or face the FBI. He'd spent the night going over his options. There weren't many. Damien Crowe had been thorough. Every angle covered, every escape route blocked. The SEC deal was actually generous, all things considered. Fines he could afford, restrictions he could work around. He'd lose his position at the firm, but there were other firms, other cities. Fighting would mean public humiliation, potential prison time, the destruction of everything he'd built. The choice was obvious. He hated that it was obvious. At 9 a.m., he called his lawyer. "Draft my resignation," he said, "effective immediately." "Victor, are you sure?" "Just do it." By noon, it was done. His partners were shocked but not sorry to see him go. His clients would be redistributed. His office cleared out by the end of the week. 20 years of work, gone in a day. All because he couldn't let one woman go. He opened his laptop and pulled up Elowen's social media one last time. She'd deleted everything months ago, but he'd saved screenshots. Pictures of her smiling, looking at him like he was everything. Those days felt like someone else's life now. He closed the laptop and made a call to a headhunter in Chicago. Time to start over. But as he packed up his apartment over the next few days, anger simmered beneath the surface. Not the hot rage that made you stupid, the cold kind that calculates and waits. Damien Crowe thought he'd won. Maybe he had, for now. But Victor Halston was patient when he needed to be. And patient men always got another chance. 3 weeks later, Elowen stood outside the Columbia admissions office with paperwork that would reinstate her graduate status. Her advisor, Dr. Sarah Chen, had made it happen. Pulled strings, argued her case, convinced the department that Elowen's leave of absence was justified and her return would be an asset. "You're sure about this?" Dr. Chen asked as they walked across campus. "It's a lot to take on right now." "I'm sure." Elowen looked up at the buildings she'd thought she'd never see again. "This is what I wanted before everything fell apart. I'm not letting him take it from me anymore." "Good, because I've already signed you up to TA my urban poverty seminar next semester." "You what?" Dr. Chen smiled. "Consider it your welcome back present, and punishment for making me worry about you for the last year." They talked about course schedules and thesis requirements until Elowen's phone buzzed. A text from Damien. "How'd it go?" She typed back, "I'm officially a grad student again. Knew you would be. Dinner tonight to celebrate?" "Yes, but I'm cooking. Deal." Dr. Chen noticed her smiling at her phone. "New development in your life?" "Something like that." "Good. You deserve something good." Elowen wasn't sure she deserved anything, but she was learning to accept it anyway. That evening, she attempted to make dinner in Damien's kitchen. Attempted being the key word. The chicken was dry, the vegetables overcooked. The sauce separated into something that looked vaguely toxic. "This is terrible," she announced when Damien got home. He looked at the spread on the counter. "Yeah, it really is. You're supposed to lie and say it's fine. I don't lie to you. That was the deal." He grabbed his phone. "I'm ordering Thai." "I wanted to do something nice." "You being here is nice. The food is just food." He kissed the top of her head. "Besides, you have other talents." "Like what?" "You're 3 chapters into the most depressing book ever written and actually enjoying it." She glanced at the power broker on the coffee table. "It's not depressing. It's illuminating. It's 900 pages about how power corrupts people." Exactly. Illuminating." He laughed and ordered dinner while she cleaned up her cooking disaster. They ate on the couch with containers spread between them, arguing about Robert Moses and urban planning and whether good intentions mattered if the execution caused harm. It felt normal in a way nothing had felt normal in years. After dinner, Damien showed her something he'd been working on. Plans for a housing development in the Bronx. Affordable units mixed with market-rate apartments. Community spaces, green areas. I want your input, he said, spreading blueprints across the coffee table. I'm not an architect. No, but you understand what people actually need. What would make this work for the families who'd live here? She studied the plans, noting where things could be improved. Better lighting in the common areas. More storage. Spaces for kids to play that weren't just afterthoughts. And here, she pointed to a corner of the first floor, this could be a community center. GED classes, job training, childcare services. Make it actually useful. Damien made notes. You're good at this. I've been studying it for years. No, I mean, seeing what's missing. Most people look at plans and see what's there. You see what should be there. That's just paying attention. That's exactly what I need. They worked on the plans until midnight, Elowen making suggestions and Damien incorporating them into the design. It reminded her of why she'd loved urban sociology in the first place. The possibility of making things better, of building systems that actually helped people. When they finally stopped, her eyes were tired, but her mind was buzzing. Thank you, she said. For what? For making me remember what I cared about before all of this. Damien set down his pen. You never forgot. You just had to survive first. Is that what I'm doing? Surviving? No. He looked at her directly. You're living. There's a difference. She realized he was right. For the first time since leaving Victor, she wasn't just getting through each day. She was actually building towards something. The next morning, Marcus appeared with news. Halston's leaving New York, he said, showing Damien a report on his tablet. Took a position in Chicago. Starts next month. That was fast. He's motivated. Also, his apartment's on the market, selling everything. Damien scanned the report. Any indication he's planning something? Not that I can find. Looks like he's cutting his losses and running. Keep monitoring him anyway, for the next 6 months at least. Already planned on it. After Marcus left, Elowen asked, Do you really think he's done? I think he's smart enough to know when he's lost. Damien set down the tablet. But I'm not taking chances with your safety. 6 months is a long time to keep watching someone. I'd watch him for 6 years if that's what it took. The certainty in his voice should have felt suffocating. With Victor, that kind of intensity had been a warning sign, a prelude to control. But with Damien, it felt different. He wasn't trying to control her, he was trying to protect her, and he understood the difference. I have therapy today, she said. At 2. You want me to drive you? I can take the subway. I need to start doing normal things again. He hesitated. Okay, but text me when you get there. Damien, I know. I'm being overprotective. Can't help it. She kissed him quickly. I'll text, I promise. Therapy was hard. It always was. Her therapist, Dr. Monica Ross, had a way of asking questions that forced Elowen to confront things she'd rather avoid. Today, they talked about the future. You're rebuilding your life, Dr. Ross said. School, new relationship, plans for a foundation. That's a lot of change very quickly. Is that bad? It's not bad or good. It just is. But I want you to check in with yourself. Make sure you're not replacing one form of dependence with another. Elowen bristled. It's not like that with Damien. I didn't say it was, but you went from Victor controlling every aspect of your life to Damien solving all your problems. There's a middle ground you need to find. Like what? Like standing on your own, making decisions without needing his approval or resources, trusting yourself. I do trust myself. Do you? Or do you trust him to keep you safe? The question stuck with Elowen for the rest of the session and the entire subway ride home. Did she trust herself? She'd made the decision to leave Victor. That took courage. But everything since then had been facilitated by Damien. The apartment, the safety, the school reinstatement. What had she actually done on her own? When she got back to the penthouse, she found Damien on a call in his office. She waved and went to the guest room, though it felt less like a guest room now and more like her room. She pulled out her laptop and started researching apartments. Not because she wanted to leave, but because Dr. Ross was right. She needed to know she could stand on her own if she had to. The prices made her stomach drop. Even with her teaching assistant stipend, she couldn't afford anything decent. She'd have to find roommates, live somewhere far from campus, probably go back to the kind of building where the locks didn't work and the heat was optional. But she could do it. The thought was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. What are you looking at? She jumped. Damien stood in the doorway. Just researching. She closed the laptop. Apartments? How did you... I saw the screen before you closed it. He came into the room. You're leaving. No. Maybe. I don't know. She stood, needing to move. My therapist thinks I'm becoming too dependent on you. And what do you think? I think she might be right. Damien was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Okay. Okay? If you need to get your own place to feel independent, do it. I'll help you find somewhere safe. That's exactly the problem. You helping, you solving, you making it easier. She turned to face him. I need to know I can do this myself. You can. How do you know? Because you already did it once. You left Victor with 2 bags and no plan. Made it work. You're stronger than you think. Or maybe I just traded one safety net for another. The words came out harsher than she intended. Damien's expression shifted. Not hurt exactly, but something close. Is that what you think this is? He asked quietly. Me being another version of Victor? No, I didn't mean... She stopped, frustrated with herself. I don't know what I mean. I just know that I need to figure out who I am without someone else defining it for me. Then do it. He moved toward the door. But don't use me as an excuse to run from something good because you're scared it might turn bad. He left before she could respond. Elowen sat on the bed and tried not to cry. She'd hurt him. She could see that, but she'd also told the truth. And if she'd learned anything from the last 2 years, it was that telling the truth, even when it was hard, was the only way forward. They didn't talk much over the next few days, not because they were fighting, but because Elowen needed space to think and Damien was giving it to her. She went to her classes, started her TA work, met with Dr. Chen to discuss her thesis, did all the normal things that normal graduate students did, and slowly she started to feel like herself again. Not the self she'd been before Victor. That person was gone. But someone new, stronger, more careful, but also more certain. On Friday night, she found Damien in his office working late. Can we talk? She asked from the doorway. He looked up. Yeah, come in. She sat in the chair across from his desk. I've been thinking about what I said, about dependence. And you were right. I was using it as an excuse because I'm scared. She took a breath. I'm scared that this feels too good, that I'm going to wake up one day and realize I've let someone else take over my life again. I'm not trying to take over your life. I know, but that's how it started with Victor too. Small things, helpful things. Until suddenly, I couldn't remember what I wanted anymore because I'd gotten so used to him wanting it for me. Damien set down his pen. What do you want now? I want to stay here, with you. But I also want to know that I'm choosing it, not defaulting to it, because it's easier than being alone. So what does that look like? She'd been thinking about this for days. It looks like me paying rent, a real amount, not $1. It looks like me making my own decisions about school and work without asking your permission. It looks like us being partners, not you being my protector. I can do that. Can you? Because you're used to solving problems, and I need you to let me solve my own sometimes. He considered this. That's going to be hard for me. I know, but I'll try. He stood and came around the desk. Anything else? Yeah. I need you to stop having Marcus track Victor. I need to trust that he's actually gone. This one was harder. She could see it in his face. Elowen, I know you want to keep me safe, but I can't live my life looking over my shoulder waiting for him to come back. Either he's gone or he's not. And I have to believe he's gone. Damien was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, 1 more month. Let Marcus monitor him for 1 more month. After that, we stop unless there's a real threat. It wasn't everything she wanted, but it was compromise. Okay, she said, 1 month. He pulled her up from the chair and into his arms. I'm sorry if I made you feel like you couldn't stand on your own. You didn't. I need to prove it to myself. Then prove it. I'll be here when you do. They stood there in his office, holding each other, and Elowen felt something shift. This wasn't perfect. It wasn't some fairy tale ending where everything worked out cleanly. But it was real. and real was enough. 6 months later, Elowen defended her thesis to a committee that asked tough questions but ultimately approved her work with minor revisions. She'd written about housing insecurity and domestic violence, using her own experience to inform the research without exploiting it. It was honest work. Important work. Damien was waiting outside the building when she emerged, looking out of place among the graduate students in his tailored suit. "How'd it go?" he asked. "I passed." She was grinning so hard her face hurt. "I actually passed." He picked her up and spun her around, right there on the Columbia campus, not caring who saw. "Told you you'd do it," he said when he set her down. "You were annoyingly confident about that." "I'm annoyingly confident about most things. It's part of my charm." They walked through campus hand in hand, and Elowen marveled at how different her life looked now. She had her degree, had been offered a teaching position at a community college in Brooklyn, had helped Damien launch the foundation, officially named the Second Chance Housing Initiative, which was already helping its first clients find safe places to live. And she had him, not as a savior or a solution, but as a partner. "My sister wants to meet you," she said as they headed toward the subway. "Officially, not just phone calls." "When?" "Next weekend. She's driving up from Philly." "Should I be nervous?" "Terrified. She's very protective." "Good." Damien squeezed her hand. "You should have people who are protective of you. I have you. You have more than me. You've got Claire, your advisor, the people at the foundation, a whole network." He paused at the subway entrance. "You're not alone anymore." She'd spent so long feeling invisible, insignificant, like she could disappear and no one would notice. Now she had proof that she mattered. That night, back at the penthouse that had somehow become home, Elowen painted. Not the darkness this time, not the crushing weight of what she'd survived. She painted morning light, the view from the penthouse windows at dawn, gold and pink and the promise of something better. Damien found her there at midnight, covered in paint again, standing back to examine her work. "It's beautiful," he said. "It's hope." She set down her brush. "That's what this place gave me. What you gave me. Hope that things could be different." "They are different." "Yeah." She turned to face him. "They really are." He pulled her close, careful of the paint, and they stood there in the quiet penthouse looking at the canvas. "I love you," he said. Simple. Direct. No games. She'd known it for a while, had felt it in every protective gesture, every problem solved, every moment he'd given her space when she needed it. "I love you too," she said back, and meant it. Two broken people who'd found each other in the dark and decided to build something better in the light. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. They still fought sometimes, had bad days where old trauma surfaced, struggled with boundaries and independence and what partnership actually meant. But they worked through it, together. A year after Victor left New York, Marcus delivered his final report. He settled in Chicago, new firm, smaller clients, keeping his head down. No indication he's thinking about Elowen at all. "You're sure?" Damien asked. "As sure as I can be without reading his mind. He's moved on." Damien closed the file. "Then we're done monitoring him." "Really?" "Yeah, Elowen was right. We can't live waiting for him to come back. He's gone. That's enough." After Marcus left, Damien found Elowen in what had become her studio, the guest room she'd finally claimed fully as her own space. She was working on a series of paintings for a gallery show, small pieces about transformation and survival. "Victor's officially off our radar," he said. She looked up from her canvas. "How do you feel about that?" "Nervous, but trusting your judgment." "That must be hard for you." "Everything worth doing is." She set down her brush and crossed to him. "Thank you for letting go." "Thank you for pushing me too." They kissed, and it still felt new every time, like they were discovering each other over and over. "The foundation got another grant," Damien said when they pulled apart. "Enough to expand to 2 more buildings." "That's amazing." Your proposal is what got it. The board was impressed with your research." "Our research. I didn't do it alone." "No, but you're the one who made it make sense." He paused. "They want you to present at the next meeting. Share the vision." A year ago, the thought would have terrified her. Standing in front of wealthy donors, explaining herself, being seen. Now it just felt like the next step. "When is it?"
Next month. You have time to prepare. I'll do it. I know you will.
That confidence, not in him, but in herself, was everything. The gallery show opened on a Thursday in October. Elowyn's paintings lined one wall of a small gallery in Chelsea, 12 pieces charting a journey from darkness to light, from breaking to healing. The opening was packed. Friends from school, colleagues from the foundation, people Damien had invited from his world. And Claire, who'd driven up from Philadelphia and immediately pulled Elowyn into a crushing hug.
I'm so proud of you, her sister whispered. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to. They walked through the gallery together, Claire studying each painting with the intensity of someone who knew what they represented. This one, she stopped in front of the darkest piece, the one Elowyn had painted in those first weeks at the penthouse. This is him. Victor. Yeah. And this? She moved to the final piece, the morning light. That's now. Claire turned to her sister. You made it. I'm making it, present tense. Still a work in progress. Aren't we all? Damien found them a few minutes later, holding champagne glasses he'd acquired from somewhere. Claire, he said, offering her one. Good to finally meet you in person. You're the one who installed the security system at my apartment, Claire said, accepting the glass. Among other things. And you're dating my sister. Also among other things.
Claire studied him with the careful assessment of someone who'd seen her sister hurt before and wasn't about to let it happen again. You make her happy, she said finally. I try. That's all I need to know. She clinked her glass against his. But if you ever hurt her, I know where you live. Fair enough. Elowyn watched them size each other up and felt something warm settle in her chest. Her two worlds merging, the life she'd built before and the life she was building now. Later that night, after the gallery had emptied and they were back at the penthouse, Elowyn stood at the window looking out at the city. Damien came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Successful night, he said. Yeah, it was. 3 paintings sold already. I know, it's surreal. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the city that had nearly broken her but had ultimately become home again. I've been thinking, Damien said, about the future. What about it? About us. What we're building. Whether you'd want to make it official. She turned in his arms. Official how? He pulled a small box from his pocket. Like this. The ring inside was simple. A single stone on a thin band. Nothing ostentatious. Exactly her style. Damien, before you answer, let me say something. He took a breath. I'm not Victor. I'm not asking you to give up anything or change who you are. I'm asking if you want to build a life together, as equals, as partners. That's a lot of qualifiers. I'm a careful man. You're a terrified man. That too. He smiled slightly. So what do you say? She looked at the ring, then at him, then out at the city. A year ago, she'd been broken. 6 months ago, she'd been healing. Now she was whole, or as whole as anyone ever really was. And she was choosing this, not because it was easy or safe, but because it was right. Yes, she said. I say yes. He slipped the ring on her finger with shaking hands, and they kissed there by the window with the whole city spread out below them. It wasn't perfect. They both knew that. There would be hard days ahead. Trauma didn't disappear just because you fell in love. Trust took time to build and was easy to shake, but they had something Victor and Elowyn never had. Honesty, partnership, choice. And that was enough. More than enough. Somewhere in Chicago, Victor Halston closed his laptop without searching for Elowyn's name. He'd thought about it, almost typed it in a dozen times over the past year. But he'd learned his lesson. Some battles weren't worth refighting. Some losses were permanent. He'd built a decent life here, smaller than before but stable. A new girlfriend who didn't ask too many questions. A routine that didn't include destroying anyone. It wasn't the empire he'd had in New York, but it was enough to survive on. And survival was all that mattered now. In Manhattan, the city that never slept kept spinning. People loved and fought and started over. Buildings went up, businesses opened, lives intersected and diverged in patterns too complex to track. And in a penthouse on the 32nd floor, Elowyn Mercer, soon to be Elowen Crow, finally stopped looking over her shoulder. She was safe. She was free. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. Home.